Welcome everybody. My name is Nick Late. I'm the Head of Examination Services at the JCQ, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Lynn Dustin.
Good morning.
So I'm the Head of Examination Services at the JCQ. Lynn is Manager of the JCQ Centre Inspection Service England. So obviously what we're going to do is take you through the key aspects of the ICE. We are also obviously going to take you through key aspects of inspections to make sure and we know that you are new to role exams officers, so basically to help you prepare for the summer examination series, so summer 2025, to make sure that you're prepared, you've got that confidence, you're ready to go, you're going to spring into the summer series. So what will happen is that Lynn and I will go through the slides, and then we will take questions at the end of the session. But please post any questions you have on the Q&A button. Okay, so as I say, if you've got a question, obviously post it, and then we will go through all the questions at the end and make sure that we have answered your question.
Yeah, if you could just remember to put some context around the question you're posing, because by the time we get to the end, we won't obviously be at that section, and it can sometimes be a bit confusing what the question relates to.
Sure.
Thank you, Nick.
It's okay.
So, Centre Inspection Services, we carry out 7 distinct types of inspection across the academic year. We do an end-to-end operation, starting with the sort of pre-registration inspections, followed by a new centre will get a readiness inspection prior to their first series. And you'll get general inspections, access arrangement inspections, question paper integrity inspections. And if you should move address or change your secure storage, we'd come out and do that. Across England and Scotland, we have 120 to 130 inspectors. Our inspectors are predominantly ex-exams officers, but could also be an SLT member who had responsibility for exams. So they do come to us with a wealth of experience. The general inspection takes approximately 60 to 18 minutes, depending on a number of factors. It could be as quick as 40 minutes if you were running a centre where you only had one candidate and it's a very, very small centre, and your paperwork and everything was all in one confined space. But it could take 80 minutes if there's a large number of rooms to see. So some centres inspectors will go to might have around one case we talked to a guy was 90 extra,
yes.
90 extra additional rooms. So that obviously would take much longer for the inspector to get around those. We say that the inspector normally arrives after 8 for the morning exam, and the reason I say normally is that on occasion we may be asked by the awarding organisation to go in before 8. If you're not there and you can't let us in, don't worry. But if you were there and we got there before 8, it would be because an awarding organisation has asked us to go in early. In all cases, the inspector will want to view the exam room, the secure storage room, and access arrangement paperwork. So just to say, particularly with the access arrangement paperwork, we're very aware that SenCOs do work part-time or may do other duties in the centre. So if that is the case, if you can just make sure that you know how to show the inspector the access paperwork, that you know who to point them in the direction of if your SenCO was not available. The output from the series is a report. So you'll get a report sent to you, which will have any areas to action that you need to do, and we'll give you a deadline in which to do that by. The inspector will want to meet with the exams officer, the SenCO, and they will ask that the head of centre is notified. We know that the heads of centre are very busy, but we want the head of centre to be aware that we're there. It gives them an opportunity to ask any questions about the inspection, and also does allow the inspector to reflect on what a good job you're doing and, you know, the role of the exams officer. So during the examination series, this is what we're going to cover mostly today. We're going to go through journey of question papers, the inspections as of done, on the day of the exam, during the exam, starting, handing secure material, access arrangements, end of exam, malpractice, and some pre-exam checks. One thing that's not up there are the policies. And that's because at the general inspection this year, we are not checking the policies other than the written procedure to identify candidates and word processor policy. This was in response to feedback from centres who felt that when we were going in to do the general inspections, it was taking too long to check the policies, or there was inconsistency because some inspectors were looking at them in depth because they had the time, and other inspectors were unable to do more than just check it was in place. In the autumn, we did a pilot of 50 centres, sent out the policies survey to the heads of centres. It was very successful. We sent out feedback to those heads of centres to ask them how they felt it went, and they have fed back very positively. So we have continued that pilot in the spring. And as we speak now, some of your centres will have received a survey to do a policy return. Nick, I'm going to hand over to you.
Right, okay, so in terms of the journey of a question paper packet, what I would say is have a look at the I section of the JCQ website, because there is within that section some really useful infographics and checklists. So do have a look at that. And there is on the JCQ website within the I section an infographic of the journey of a question paper packet, or could be packets. So when the question papers obviously arrive in your centre, then obviously you must make sure that your site manager, your facilities team, that they are signing for the delivery of those question papers as soon as they arrive. And they need obviously to include obviously how many boxes, the awarding body, etc. And that's absolutely key, because obviously an inspector will want to see that. An awarding body may ask to see that. So do make sure obviously that your facility staff, site manager, premises team, whatever the terminology is within your particular school or college, that they are actually signing that. Now, if there is no key holder on site, then obviously the question papers obviously cannot be accepted. Okay, so the delivery cannot be accepted if there is no key holder on site. If basically there is a key holder on site and they've actually completed the logs, then the papers must be moved to secure storage immediately. Now, it may be that actually you're the exams officer. You might, at this particular stage of the year, you're not going to be perhaps in school every single day, or you might not be working late into the afternoon. So if your site manager has a key to the secure room, then they can put the boxes inside the secure room, so they're safe in there. And then obviously, ideally, you would obviously check the question paper packets on the day they're received. But obviously, if you're not in school or college when they are being delivered, it could be sort of late in the afternoon. The site manager, premises managers put those boxes in the secure room. The next day, that's obviously when you're doing your checking. So you're checking those question paper packets against the awarding body's consignment note, dispatch note. You're checking those question paper packets against your entries as well, your centre timetable. And obviously, if there are any discrepancies there, so a question paper packet is missing, then you must contact the awarding body immediately. If a question paper packet is damaged, you must contact the awarding body immediately. And I think we had it, didn't we, Lynn, at the TEO conferences? Just be careful when you actually start to open those boxes, and don't inadvertently actually damage the question paper.
There's one particular awarding body that doesn't have the protective sheet in it. So if you use one of those slashers to open the boxes, you could cut through the top packet.
That's just a tip to be careful.
And I just say that be very mindful that the journey of a question paper is definitely what an inspector will be looking at.
Yeah. So the other thing which is absolutely vital, obviously, is that when you're removing question paper packets from your secure storage facility, and that is, as Lynn said, an inspector will want to be looking at this as well. So they'll want to see the journey of those question papers through your centre, that they are being logged by your facilities team, then they're being logged by the exams team, and also that you are logging that second pair of eyes check, because it's absolutely vital that before a question paper packet is opened, when those question paper packets are being removed from the secure storage facility, the secure storage unit, that the right question paper packet or question paper packets have been pulled. So, for example, that if it is GCSE Mathematics paper 2 on that particular morning, the question paper packets that you removed from your secure storage facility, your secure storage unit, they are all GCSE Maths paper 2. You haven't inadvertently pulled out a paper 3 packet. So it's really important that you're doing those checks all the way through. Those question papers are moving through your centre, and as Lynn said, that is something that a JCQ centre inspector wants to see, that the logs have been completed. And obviously there are logs on the JCQ website. For example, you don't have to use it, you could use your own centre form, but there is a form on the JCQ website that you can use, for example, to log the second pair of eyes check.
So just some things that you should note is packages that are delivered to reception cannot be held in another key lock cupboard at reception. They must be collected. We've had quite a few queries about this recently as to whether they could be stored in there if the exams officer wasn't available. If there are no key holders, as Nick said, you should not accept the packets from from parcel force, if it's parcel force. On receipt, the question paper packets still in their packaging must be moved immediately to the secure room for checking. The exam paper checking prior to putting in the secure facility after receipt does not need to be done by 2 people. The reason we're saying that is there's been some confusion that came up in some conferences that the TEO ran, where they thought that when it checked into the secure facility, that they had to have 2 people as per the second pair of eyes. You do not need to have 2 people doing that check. However, unless there is a conflict of interest situation, then that would be a way to mitigate the conflict of interest by having a second person checking alongside.
Right, so I think it's me now for a run. So in terms, obviously, of the pre-exam check, so before, obviously, you're getting your question papers, before you're doing, obviously, those checks, obviously, then obviously you just obviously need to make sure that your secure storage room is solely assigned to examinations. It's solely dedicated to exams. So there's nothing in there that an inspector's BDIs would seize on. So, for example, there's nothing like Christmas decorations stuck in there. It is, purely going to be used for examinations. So you're going to be storing within that secure storage room. You might have, for example, your clocks, your posters. You might have awarding body stationery, for example, your attendance registers in there, etc. Okay, so just basically before your exam start, just do a sweep of your secure room to make sure that all the material in there is going to be relating to examinations. Now, your secure storage room must be large enough to walk into, and you can actually close the door when you're sorting confidential materials. We've just spoken about, obviously, checking those question paper packets before they're put into the secure storage facility. So when you're checking in those question paper packets, you need obviously to make sure that your secure room is large enough to walk into. The door basically is shut. There must obviously be 2 to 6 key holders. Now, I know the last bit may sound strange, one of whom should be the exams officer, and you might think, why on earth is he telling us this? But when Lynn and I, we train JCQ inspectors every year, Lynn and I remember one year there was one inspector who actually told us that he'd gone into, I think it was he'd gone into a centre, and bizarrely, the exams officer wasn't one of the key holders. So the minimum is 2, the maximum basically is 6, and there must be more than 1 set of keys. And those keys obviously must be stored securely either on your person, on yourself, or basically they're in a coded key safe. Now, your site manager can be a key holder to the secure room, as I just said. So you could have the situation where they will actually put those consignment of question papers, either put the boxes into the secure room, so they can be a key holder to the secure room. Obviously, they couldn't be a key holder to the secure storage facility, because that is going to be exams office personnel only, or the senior leader who has oversight of examination administration. So if I was a deputy head and I had oversight of examination administration, exams within the school, I could be a key holder to the secure storage facility, but the site manager couldn't. Okay, and obviously the site manager, if they have their key, just check obviously that they're keeping their key in a coded key safe or on their person. Okay, and obviously in terms of the secure storage facility, then that's obviously going to be, as I've said, 2 to 6 key holders, purely obviously those folk that are associated with examination. So that's going to be obviously yourself as the exams officer. You might be lucky to have an assistant, so they could be a key holder. Equally, a member obviously of the senior leadership team who has oversight for examinations. If you're an FE college, you're obviously going to be probably maxing up to the 6 key holders. So as I've said, obviously the keys must be stored securely in a coded key safe or on your person. And obviously you must make sure obviously that your secure storage facility has a capacity to hold 3 weeks worth of question papers. And the secure storage facility must only be holding live confidential examination material. So you can't have within that secure storage facility mock examination papers, internal school tests. Okay, it's purely assigned for secure confidential examination material, so your live question papers.
Can I just note,
Yeah,
in those pictures, the second picture of the key safe, coded key safe, is an electronic coded key safe. If you do have an electronic coded key safe, the inspector will ask where you keep the override key, because that needs to be kept securely or on your person. Thanks.
Thanks. Right, so obviously in terms of Invigilator planning, now this obviously is absolutely key. So you need to make sure obviously that you have got sufficient invigilators in place. And I think it's probably fair to say that it has been sort of quite challenging for centres to recruit invigilators post-pandemic. But obviously you do need to make sure that you have got enough invigilators, and not obviously just obviously the invigilators for running the exam, but also those other scenarios. So you might have a candidate who requires a supervised rest break. That supervised rest break needs to take place outside of the examination room. So they might be, for example, a student with very severe anxiety. It might be a student, say, with a mental health condition, and they need a break during their examination, but they need to come out of the examination room. So you're going to have an invigilator who is going to actually take that student outside of the examination room. So factor that in. Toilet breaks. You might have a student who actually does need to go to the toilet during the examination, probably because of a medical condition, but it might be that they genuinely do need to go to the toilet. They basically will need to be supervised. Then, of course, there's going to be the candidates who are using a mobile phone for medical purposes. Now, you could have a small group of candidates who are accommodated away from the main examination room. You've got 6 candidates, one of whom needs a mobile phone for medical purposes, whether that be diabetes, whether that be a heart condition. So you need another invigilator in that room, because the moment that candidate is handed their mobile phone to check their blood sugar levels, for example, to check their heart rates, they need to be individually supervised to make sure obviously that they are solely using that mobile phone for medical purposes. And then, of course, you're going to have your timetable clash candidates. And you know, it's inevitable that you will find that there are candidates who have timetable clashes, particularly at A level, because of the sort of rich curriculum, the subject choices. So you might have a candidate who is going to be sitting a examination that was actually scheduled for the afternoon later in the morning. So the candidate has got 2 A-level examinations in the afternoon, which are more than 3 hours in duration. So one of those A-level examinations is going to be sat mid-morning. They basically will need to be supervised between finishing that rescheduled A-level examination and then starting their scheduled A-level examination in the afternoon. So you've got to make sure that they are supervised between finishing one exam and starting another. Okay, so just think about that when you're have you got enough invigilators? Have I covered all those scenarios in that first bullet point? Now, you could have a candidate who is in a room on their own. So Lynn and I are together. And let's say that Lynn is acting as my scribe and she is also acting as my invigilator. There is no conflict of interest. Lynn has been thoroughly trained as an invigilator. She's also been thoroughly trained as a scribe, but you will need a roving invigilator to come into the room. So hypothetically, an invigilator, a roving invigilator would come into this room periodically to observe the interaction between Lynn and I. So I am dictating my responses to Lynn. She is typing away on a laptop. She's not actually saying to me, "Oh, I don't think that's right, Nick. Do you want to change your answer? Are you sure about this one?" There's nothing like that. She is just literally typing as I am dictating my responses to her. So you will need a roving invigilator where you've got candidates who are being accommodated on a one-to-one basis, where the invigilator is also acting as a reader and or the scribe. And remember that the sole invigilator cannot be a peer, relative or friend of the candidate. Okay. Now, obviously, you need to make sure, obviously, that you are training your invigilators, that they have been thoroughly trained and they actually understand what they must not, and may do during an examination. So they cannot actually sit there reading a book or reading a newspaper or sitting there reading the question paper. They've got to understand that their sole focus is actually maintaining the integrity, the security of the examination. So you do need, obviously, to keep a record of the invigilator training, both the content and also the attendance, because that's something that an inspector will ask you. How have you trained your invigilators? And they will want to be satisfied that that training has been appropriate, thorough, etc. And you're actually showing, yes, this is a list of the invigilators. Might be more than one session, but this is how basically they've been trained. You might train them yourself as a centre, might set them a test, do a PowerPoint presentation, etc. You've also obviously got to complete training for any invigilator who is going to be observing access arrangements. So as I've just mentioned, obviously, Lynn, in that hypothetical scenario, she's been trained as an invigilator, she's been trained as a scribe. The roving invigilator who's coming into the room, they understand what the scribe must not, may do, what the reader must, may not, must do, etc. The same basically with a prompter. So if they observe a room and they're going into that room and the prompter is actually saying, "Ethan, focus on the question. Ethan, focus on your exam," and not actually saying to Ethan, "Oh, I don't think that's right there. Do you want to change that? Don't forget what we did in class." So it's nothing like that. So again, the prompter is adhering to those regulations. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is on the JCQ website within the ICE section an invigilator training checklist that's been updated for 2025 with the appropriate references to the ICE booklet. So you might find that useful if you're still undertaking invigilator training. And make sure, obviously, that your invigilators and candidates are fully aware of what your centre's policy is on managing mobile phones during the examinations. So in terms, obviously, the candidates, actually, before they're entering the examination room, those mobile phones are being collected off, and they understand that before they enter the examination room, somebody is going to say, "You've got to hand over your mobile phone, put it into a plastic bag," etc. But the candidates know what your policy is on managing mobile phones, and make sure, obviously, that you get the support of a senior leader with that ahead of year, that's really drilled into them, that they've got to hand in their mobile phones. They understand the consequences. If they don't, they bring that phone into the room. It's significant, and Lynn will be talking a little bit later on about malpractice. And also that your invigilators understand as well, because as I said earlier, there may well be candidates who do need access to their mobile phone for medical purposes. So the invigilator knows, actually, yes, Josh sitting there, I know that's why Josh is seated close to the invigilator's table, because I've got to hold his mobile phone. And when he raises his hand, he asks for his mobile phone, I give it to him, but I've got to individually supervise him whilst he's using that mobile phone. So just remember that, work with your SenCO, that your SenCO is telling you those candidates who need mobile phones during an examination because of a medical condition. Okay, so in terms obviously of additional rooms, now Lynn mentioned obviously when we were doing the TEO conferences, obviously the sheer number of rooms, and I don't know that anybody here from FE colleges, but certainly FE colleges, are really maxed out when it comes to GCSE English language and GCSE maths exams. As I mentioned, you will be using additional rooms for candidates who might need a reader, might need a scribe, they're using word processors, etc. So obviously, whatever room that you're actually using, obviously make sure that you're undertaking those checks on all those rooms, that they are appropriate in terms of, I won't say heating, I don't think fingers crossed, we won't need to worry about heating in May and June, but just think about obviously lighting, ventilation. That really is an appropriate room for those students to be sitting their exams in. It really is an appropriate environment. So just do those checks, okay? Make sure. Go on.
One of the main things that they get a lot of requests on is when it's noisy outside. Yes. So just check the noise level of all the exam rooms.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you, Lynn. Because I know last year, certainly a couple of my awarding body colleagues in terms of special consideration were getting those applications for special consideration where there had been complaints from students and invariably parents where there was noise from an adjoining room, from a corridor. So just
noise above as well.
So for example, just make sure actually that when that exam is being conducted, there isn't somebody actually playing a musical instrument, etc. Okay, that actually you're making sure those corridors are absolutely quiet. I think there was one, I think I'm right in saying, I think there was one where that like a fight had broken out, etc. So just basically with the support of your senior leadership team, make sure nobody's going to cause a kerfuffle along those corridors. There's nobody actually is going to be, as I say, that's going to be doing building work nearby. Somebody's having a music lesson, etc., or a drama lesson, etc. Desks obviously must face the same way. With your seating plan, make sure you do have seating plans, obviously, for those examinations. Even if it is just one candidate, you still need a seating plan. An awarding body might ask to see that seating plan. So you've got to make sure you've got seating plans for all the rooms in operation on that morning, on that afternoon. And obviously that you've highlighted candidates with access arrangements. So you might, use abbreviations like R is reader, S is scribe, 25 ET, 25% extra time, P prompter, etc. But just make sure obviously that where you've got candidates with access arrangements, they've been highlighted on your seating plan. And obviously with your IT team, now I think it's important as I go through this, don't think you're alone in this, okay? Do get obviously the support of your senior leader, get the support of your IT team. So you've got, you get a good contact, somebody that's really going to help you in the IT team. So they're checking that those laptop word processors have the appropriate restrictions in place. So the candidate isn't going to have access to spelling and grammar check unless they have an approved application for a scribe. They can't access the internet. They can't reactivate the internet. They're not going to have access to any form of electronic communication. Okay, so as I say, with the support of your IT colleagues, just check those laptops, the word processors, because You have to provide those as a centre. Candidate can't bring their own laptop. You're providing it as a centre. So just work with your IT team to make sure that they are compliant with the published regulations. Now, in terms of posters, obviously there are two types of posters there you can see. So we've obviously just focused on the warning to candidates. You will also need the unauthorised items poster. But just to say that in terms of the warning to candidates poster, if you're a new exams officer, you might find within your secure room there are some laminated versions of the warning to candidates from the previous academic year, 23-24. That's absolutely fine. You can use for this year, you can use those laminated versions of the warning to candidates. You might think, and I met an exams officer a couple of weeks ago, and she really liked the new warning to candidates. She thought it was much better for the students, and they had been using that in their mock examinations. So you can use old, you can use new, you can use a mixture. The key thing, though, is that outside every exam room in operation that morning, that afternoon, you have got on the door the warning to candidates poster and the unauthorised items poster. Okay, so when Lynn and I briefed the inspectors on this, so it doesn't matter if you've got the old or the new or a mixture. Key thing, just remember, every exam room I'm using that morning, that afternoon, I've got to have the warning to candidates and the unauthorised items poster on the doors. Access arrangements. Okay, now this obviously is very much, and Lynn touched on this, this is very much the preserve of your SenCO. Okay, so your SenCO obviously has got to make sure that where an online application is required, the candidate does have an approved online application for that qualification. The SenCO, this isn't your responsibility, the SenCO has produced the required documentation and the candidate has actually given their signed candidate personal data consent form. So what you might want to do is just, remind your SenCO and say, I've been on a webinar with the JCQ. We were looking obviously at preparation for the summer. I'm just reminding you, just to make sure that you have got all the evidence to hand, because sometimes when the inspector calls, the signed candidate personal data consent form can't be found. The word processor policy can't be found. And as Lynn has mentioned, that is something that a JCQ centre inspector will ask to see, what is your centre's policy on the use of word processor? And that is something obviously that needs to be written by a relevant member of the senior leadership team with support from the SenCO. But just remind your SenCO, our word processor policy is easy to hand, isn't it? You have got it in your access arrangements file folder. You have got all the evidence, haven't you, in a file or folder, because an inspector will ask to see this at an inspection. So we do need to have this ready. Make sure obviously that invigilators, and this is key, that invigilators do know who's got access arrangements. So they know that that student is going to have 25% extra time. That student might need supervised rest breaks. This student might need 25% extra time and supervised rest breaks. So what I would say there is speak to your SenCO, make sure that your SenCO is giving you a list of those candidates with approved access arrangements. So for example, that student will need a Polish to English bilingual dictionary in their GCSE maths exam. That student can't have a bilingual dictionary in their GCSE geography exam because it's assessing spelling, punctuation and grammar. But in a nutshell, just make sure that your SenCO is giving you a list, a spreadsheet of what candidates have got what access arrangements, and then you're communicating that to your invigilators. So there's no issues on the morning or the afternoon of an examination, because that sometimes happens. The candidate doesn't actually get their question paper on yellow coloured paper, or we forgot to give the candidate 25% exam, and then you're having to go down the special consideration road, and then probably having to deal with an angry parent, etc. So just make sure you're getting that information from your SenCO. You can give that to your invigilators. I've already mentioned the seating plan. Just make sure that your SenCO has got a copy of the assessor's qualification, because sort of when it comes to the access arrangements inspection, the checking, often the issues are, Oh, we can't find the word processor policy. Oh, we don't know where the assessor's qualification is. Oh, I'm not sure where the candidate signed personal data consent form is. So that slide there that I'm talking to, just run through that with your SenCO. It really will save your centre pain at an inspection. Okay, so in terms of alternative rooming arrangements and invigilation, and I'm sure some of you may have had this, will have this, where parents will believe that their child needs to actually sit their exams away from the main examination hall room. This is a decision for your SenCO and or the relevant member of the senior leadership team. But a candidate can only sit their examinations away from the main examination hall room where they have an established difficulty. And that would be a medical condition, a physical disability, a mental health condition. You could have a candidate that has actually quite significant behavioural issues. If you put them in the main exam hall, they would go off on one. Even if you put them in a room with a smaller group of candidates, they could still cause significant disruptions. So they may have to be accommodated on a one-to-one basis. Their exam is just them and the invigilator. Okay, so alternative rooming arrangements, you will come across this, and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, you need obviously to make sure that you've got your invigilation resource in place. And obviously the practical assistant, the prompter, the reader and the scribe, they know what they must not and may do during an examination. So with a practical assistant, those applications are always automatically not approved by the online system, and then have to be referred online to the relevant awarding bodies. And the awarding body will approve the application, and that might be that they say, yes, the practical assistant can do this, but they can't do that, because if they did that, that would impact on the skills, the knowledge, the understanding the candidate has to demonstrate themselves. So just make sure that the practical assistant, if you've got any, they're quite low level though. When I say low level, you know, they're not on the scale of a reader or a scribe, probably about 1,000 applications a year, but you might have a candidate with a physical disability, a medical condition, a visual impairment who needs a practical assistant. Just make sure that the practical assistant is only doing in the exam what the awarding body has approved. And then in terms of these arrangements, which you can see there, these are centre delegated. So you might have a candidate that needs a fidget toy. They need a stress ball. Now they're centre delegated, but just make sure that there is nothing written on the stress ball, okay? Just make sure there's nothing written on the fidget toy. You might have a student who needs, a soft toy. Again, just make sure nothing's been concealed inside that soft toy. So it may be a candidate with a mental health condition. They may have autism, so they are, very. They need that sort of stress ball, that fidget toy, almost like as a kind of comfort blanket to get them through the examination. So they're centre delegated. Don't need any evidence. Don't need an online application. Your SenCO decides, but just do those checks at the time of the examination. Just check every time they're sitting the exam, nothing's been written on that fidget toy, nothing's been written on that stress ball, nothing's been concealed, say, inside a soft toy. Non-electronic ear defenders and earplugs, they're also centre delegated, as would be an examination reading pen, a question paper on coloured paper. You might have a student who needs squared paper for their examinations because they've got visual spatial difficulties, okay? Within the JCQ regulations, your SenCO should be thoroughly aware of those. There's a list of access arrangements which are centre delegated, but we just highlighted some of the sort of newer ones that you might come across there. And then mobile phone for medical purposes, well, I think I've already touched on that. You will have students who need access to a mobile phone for medical purposes. Typically, it's diabetes, but it could be a heart condition. And as I've mentioned earlier, when the student is in possession of that mobile phone, when it's handed to them, then they need to be individually supervised to make sure they are solely using the mobile phone for medical purposes. that they are not accessing the internet, they're not accessing any file, they're not actually taking a photograph of the question paper, they're not using any form of electronic communication. Okay, you might have a student who does have to have the mobile phone on their desk, and therefore they would be individually supervised, because the moment they reach for that mobile phone, again, they have to be individually supervised. So you may get that where, because of the severity, they have to have the mobile phone on the desk, so they will have to have an invigilator sitting next to them throughout the exam. Hearing aids, you may have a student who has hearing aids. Please do not ask them to remove those hearing aids. That really causes distress to candidates with a sensory impairment, and it can be quite disorientating for them. Okay, so they just need to switch their hearing aids to aeroplane mode. Please, as I say, do not ask them to remove their hearing aids. Now, you might have a student because of a sensory impairment, may have a student who's autistic, has a formal diagnosis of ADHD, has a mental health condition, and they need to listen to music or maybe white noise during an examination. Okay, so as a centre, you will be providing the device, whether that be a school MP3, MP4 player, or basically, let's say in the room here, Lynn has the laptop and she is actually playing the playlist, playing the music. Lynn's in charge of the laptop. I can't access it, but I can hear that music because that's what I need to get me through that examination. But before, obviously, the examination series starts, obviously, you just need to do, obviously, if it's classical music, if it's chill music, if it's white noise, you don't need to worry. But if the student actually is listening to music with lyrics, then somebody just needs to do a check of that music to make sure, to the best of their ability, it isn't going to give that student an advantage. Now, it is going to be background music because the student's primary focus is going to be the exam, but just having that background music helps them. But even so, you just need to do that check to make sure, to the best of your abilities, that, there's nothing on those lyrics that is going to advantage the student.
Thank you.
That's okay.
So just going to move on to on the day of exam checks. One thing I'd say is you need to check in all the rooms that there's no unauthorized materials hidden, that someone hasn't stuck something to underneath a table or left a book in the toilets or somewhere that they can easily access. Just do a cursory check around each of the rooms. Check the walls of the rooms, including those rooms for access for any display material. And I know we at the TO conferences, they had questions around whether you had to remove the display material or it could be covered. It is fine to cover it, it just can't be on display. As Nick said, please ensure laptops have the appropriate restrictions. Talk to your IT department just to check that they've had the restrictions put in place. And you must make sure everyone is aware of the centre's policy for identifying candidates. And this is important for all centres. If you've only got one candidate, you still need to have a written procedure to identify candidates. This is to cover contingencies, so everybody is sure they know how to identify that candidate. You should also implement the centre's agreed policy, as Nick said, for checking candidates' mobile phones. You want to, if they are keeping them in bags in the room, which we don't recommend at all, but if they are, you need to make sure that those phones are switched off. Should a phone go off in the exam room, it has to be reported to the malpractice teams. So it's better to make sure that you have a policy to make sure that those are switched off. One of the things I'd like to just highlight is getting your board, flip chart, whiteboard, if you're using a digital screen, with the information of the exam in the examination room, to get that accurate. I think it's probably one of the highest things that we have to write to centres about. So make sure that the display has centre number, subject title, paper number, start time, finishing times, and the date. And with the start times and the finishing times, it must be the actual start time and finishing time. If you start the exam at 9:01, it must state 9:01. If you have candidates with extra time, it needs to be clear which their times are, so they can easily identify if they 25% extra time, they know how long they've got. If you've got more than one subject, more than one paper being written in a room, it must be quite clear which paper, which start times and finishing times. It's important that everybody can see that notice board in the room who's sitting the exam. And in the training session Nick and I were running, one of the inspectors said that actually you need to go down to sitting level to identify if you can see it, because sometimes standing you can read that at the back of the room, but if you're sitting in a desk at the back, you wouldn't be able to read the notice board. So take time to go to different corners of the room, the back of the room, sit down, make sure you can read that sign. It is really important for the candidates. For timetable clashes, so candidates with timetable clashes taking exams before or later than the awarding body's published starting time must be kept under centre supervision. It is really important that they are kept under centre supervision. So where a candidate is taking total 2 exams and the total time is 3 hours or less, you can decide which examination the candidate takes first. If a candidate is taking 2 or more examinations in a session and the total time is more than 3 hours, you can conduct one of the examinations in an earlier or later session of the same day. However, if a candidate is entered for multiple examinations timetabled for the same day and the total duration of those papers is more than 6 hours for GCE and more than 5.5 for GCSE, including approved extra time allowances or supervised rest breaks, a candidate may take an examination the following morning, including Saturdays. I think it's really important to get your head around that it's more than, rather than 6 hours. It's more than 6 hours. So if you're just quite clear of when you can move exams. Also, where a candidate has a timetable clash involving AS Further Maths, AS Mathematics, A-level Further Mathematics, or A-level Mathematics examination, a centre cannot move the examination to the morning session.
Yeah, I mean, just to say on that one, so as an example, so if you had the student that was doing A-level maths and A-level sociology in the afternoon examination session, and the total time for those 2 A-level papers, A-level maths and A-level sociology, was more than 3 hours, then the A-level sociology exam could be moved to the morning session, but not the maths. Now, if you had a candidate who had 3 examinations on that day, so I'll pick, let's say they've got A-level computer science in the morning, and then they've got maths and sociology in the afternoon. And as Lynn said, so the total duration of those 3 A-level papers is more than 6 hours. And I think that's a really key point that Lynn has just mentioned to you, because it's not 6 hours, it's more than 6 hours. But in that scenario where the candidate was doing, let's say hypothetically, computer science in the morning, maths in the afternoon with sociology, the maths exam could be moved to the following morning for an overnight supervision arrangement. So what we're saying here is that the maths exam, so the AS maths exam, the AS maths exam, the A-level further maths exam, or the A-level maths exam cannot be sat earlier, but it could be sat later, i.e. the following morning for an overnight supervision arrangement.
Thanks, Nick. So in moving your question papers, they must not be removed from the secure storage facility and taken to the examination room any earlier than the 60 minutes prior to the awarding body's starting time. So whilst you might have taken them out and split the packets, they mustn't be moved to the examination room any earlier than the 60 minutes prior to the awarding body's published starting time. Again, this was a question that was coming up at TO conferences where there seemed to be some confusion. So please make sure that you don't move them any earlier. As we've touched on before, to prevent potential breaches of security, you must check the question paper packets, the correct question paper packets are open need to do the second pair of eyes check immediately before question paper packet is opened. Check the day, date, time, subject, unit, and tier of entry, and get the second person to do that check again to make sure it is. It still remains to be one of the higher maladministration reports that happen every year, is opening the wrong question paper, the wrong tier on an exam. So really, I would advise check, check, and recheck. Question paper packets must be opened in the designated examination room unless they need to be split for different rooms. So if you have to split one packet for a different room to make them into smaller sizes, don't open all of the packets, just split that one packet and put it into smaller bundles. Really split them at the last possible time and open the packets at the last possible time before moving them to other rooms.
And I think the other point there obviously is that when Lynn was saying about opening the question paper packets in the designated examination rooms, just basically make sure that you are putting the right question paper on the candidate's desk. Yeah. Because what certainly happens, and it's very much sort of foundation tier, higher tier, GCSE mathematics, GCSE combined science versus the individual sciences. They're the ones where actually, the student was actually given foundation tier when it should have been higher, or vice versa. The student was given a GCSE combined science paper rather than the GCSE biology paper. So just be particularly mindful of those GCSE subjects where there's tiers, and also combined science, versus the biology, chemistry, physics.
So as we said, if question papers need to be split for different rooms, you must ensure as fewer question paper packets are open for splitting as possible, and no earlier than the 90 minutes before the awarding body's published start time. They must be opened and checked in the secure storage room. So you'll open them, split them, put them into other envelopes, reseal them. That must all be done in the secure storage room. The question papers must be taken directly to each examination room in a separate, non-transparent, sealed envelope. And it's important that those envelopes, that they are put into a sealed envelope that isn't transparent. As you'll probably be aware, all staff accessing secure assessment material via the awarding body's online systems must have a device complying with the awarding body's MFA requirement in the JCQ. They must not be shared. You can't have one device for 4 people. You must each have your own device so that you're getting your own authentication number. For secure electronic materials, the release time for electronic question paper materials will be set by the awarding body. It may be varied by the awarding body to protect the security of the examinations. When they are accessed and printed, they must be done within a secure environment of the centre. They mustn't be accessed or printed at alternative locations without awarding body's prior permission. So if you are running exams at an alternative provision, they must still be printed, accessed and printed at your centre, put into sealed, non-transparent envelopes for transporting. Also, where you are printing them is really critical that it is a secure environment, in that it mustn't be a staff room where all the teachers are, or it shouldn't be in reception where you might get parents, students, teachers coming in and out. It should be in a private environment where you can print them easily. Some of the things with secure electronic material you should consider: what are your procedures for checking conflicts of interest for anybody involved in that printing process? So if you have a reprographics department and they're going to help you print any material, the secure electronic material, check that there are no conflicts of interest with them, that they haven't got any kids or grandchildren taking exams. What is your process for printing and collating the electronic materials? Don't just print them and then bundle them all up and take them to the secure storage room. Make sure that you've put them into a sealed, non-transparent envelope to take them out of that environment. Check who has access, who can access the secure electronic materials. And I would suggest you do that every series. So just before the series, check that someone who's maybe left or is no longer involved in the examination process no longer has access. As I said, check where you're printing and check how you ensure that only authorized members of staff have access or can print the secure storage material. Make sure that it's not just anybody can walk into that staff room whilst you're printing. For starting the exam, make sure that you are aware of the published start times, which is 9 for the morning and 1:30 for the afternoon. Although the awarding bodies will allow you to start the exam up to 30 minutes earlier or later, what you should take into account then is the secure time. If you start it later, the secure period still covers. If you start the exam earlier, the secure period still is covered. For CA examinations, the start time is 9:15. As I said, do you know the window for keeping candidates under exam conditions? Before you let the candidates go, check the time. So if you start the paper earlier, and candidates must remain under centre supervision for exams 1 hour or longer until 10 a.m. So if you started the exam at 8:30, they cannot leave before 10 a.m. And the same for the afternoon session. 2:30, if you started earlier, they can't leave before 2:30. For examinations which are less than an hour, candidates must remain under centre supervision until the awarding body's published finishing time for the examination. And awarding bodies asked us to really highlight this because last year there were quite a lot of incidents where candidates were left early. So they were allowed to leave 1 hour after the exam started, but they had started the exam at 8:30. So remember, if the exam is in the morning, you move it forward to 8:30, they must remain under centre supervision till 10 a.m.
Yeah, so if, for example, you had a GCSE exam that was 1 hour, 15 minutes, then basically taking the published starting time of 9, then that would basically finish at 10:15. What you couldn't have is starting that examination at 8:30 and then allowing those students to go at 9:45. They would have to remain until 10 o'clock. And just to say that there is a useful infographic on the JCQ website about the starting times and keeping candidates supervised. So have a look at that. That will also help you.
It will help you not make any mistakes. So late arrivals, if a candidate does arrive late, they must be given the full time of the examination. We would suggest for any candidate that arrives late that you take the time to calm them down first, because they'll be feeling a bit anxious and probably worried because they got there late, the bus was late, the train was cancelled, their parents had a flat tire. Whatever it might be, get them calmed down, run through the same checks that you do for all the other candidates. So check their mobile phone is on them, make them aware of the posters, make sure they pat themselves down, they haven't got any notes on them. Take the time to settle them before they start the examination. For very late arrivals, if the candidate arrives more than an hour late after the published start time, settle them down, do the same checks, but tell them that you will submit the script. You will complete a very late arrival, but it will be dependent on the awarding body as to whether they will accept the script. Just to go through some of the malpractice, our malpractice colleagues have asked us just to highlight a few things in malpractice. So centre staff, these are the key things that would come up. So there'll be security breaches and cyber security, maladministration, particularly invigilators doing other tasks, and improper assistance. So Nick talked a lot about training your scribes and readers so that they know what they cannot do and must do. There still are a lot of candidates getting improper assistance when they've got a scribe or a reader, and that does give them an unfair advantage. So it gets reported. Please, it's important that you train them. Invigilators doing other tasks, if they are reading the newspaper or the question paper, they can't see what the candidates are doing. So it's important that they don't do any other tasks and that they understand their responsibility.
I think also the other thing, probably just to say there, Lynn, also is to make sure that your invigilators understand, because I've seen it in the past as well, where the candidate actually doesn't understand the question, and then the invigilator reads it to them, but they can't, because that can only apply if they've got an approved online application for a reader with the appropriate evidence. So again, just make sure that your invigilators understand what they can and can't do.
So just so I mean, we are talking about malpractice, and they're not huge incidents of malpractice, but we do need to just highlight and support you to make sure that we maintain the integrity. And just one of the things that you should really be doing is that when I'm sure you'll have some sort of training around phishing emails coming through on your email. So part of the cybersecurity is being very aware of the emails that are coming through to you. Check your email addresses, make sure that they don't say you need to urgently click on this link, I think is one of the main ones, and you click on it and it's a phishing email. If you should get a phishing email, you should report it to your IT department as soon as possible. But it seems to be that there are quite a few security breaches happening through cyber security. So please be sure that you're aware of phishing emails and social engineering. Just take a bit of time to check those emails, that the email address is correct, no spelling errors. That's the other one that we're told will help highlight that it's a phishing email. Also, if you can just report any unusual activity that you might have on an awarding body's portal. So if you notice something strange on their portal that you wouldn't have seen before, just report it to the awarding organization, because that might be a way that these cyber people attacks happen, is through the awarding body's portals. If you take time that they've asked us to just really reiterate, please take time to double check the paper. So when you've done the second pair of eyes check, as I said, check it again, because that still is one of the highest maladministration areas that would come. In terms of mobile phones, I think mobile phones is the biggest issue in summer, with hundreds of students losing marks and grades as a result. So it's the one message you need to get through to your candidates when you're doing your mock exams or you're doing those pre-exam briefings. Just really highlight to them how important it is that they hand in their mobile phones, that mobile phones are switched off, because a candidate could lose their marks if they are found to have a mobile phone. AI misuse does not feature highly in cases, they say, but it's growing and it's generating a lot of queries. There's a lot of guidance on the JCQ website. Take some time to read about it. It gives information around supporting materials. It's aimed at teachers and students, but make yourself aware of it as well. And so you can signpost teachers and students to it. When we're checking the policies, we'll be looking through the surveys to head of centres. We will be looking at the malpractice policy and the inclusion of misuse of AI in the malpractice policy. Remind students they must not write or draw anything offensive in their scripts. If they do, they could get 0 marks or even be disqualified. Again, thousands of referrals are made from examiners every year with this, and sometimes candidates aren't aware that anything offensive in their scripts could be considered as malpractice, maladministration. So please, if we could ask you to highlight that to candidates when you're doing the briefing. Getting very close to the end now. So in all instances of suspect malpractice, they must be reported to the relevant awarding body, who will make the decision. The quicker you can get your notification to the awarding bodies, the quicker they can make a decision and provide a response. Try not to save all your reports to the end of the series. Do it throughout the series so that you can get a response as quickly as possible so that they can make a decision about a student's outcome. We've listed here a number of very useful links and relevant JCQ guidance. And I know that we are going to be providing the slides to you, so you'll be able to use these links to if you need any further guidance on it. And at that point, I'd like to say thank you very much. Yes. Thank you, Nick.
And you, Lynn, as well.
We're going to hand over to our colleague Vivian to see if there were any questions posted that we could answer. Vivian?
So it's going to be me. It's Rebecca. Because I'm back.
Glad there's somebody there, Rebecca. That's brilliant. Good.
Yeah. So we've got quite a few questions that have come in. The first one being, a couple of parents have asked if they can have a personal countdown timer for their son or daughter. Is this possible as an access arrangement?
Right. So the answer to that one, Rebecca, or to the person that actually answered that question, is that parents do not determine arrangements for their child's examinations. Okay, so that's a matter for your SenCO, but you wouldn't have a candidate being given a timer when it hasn't actually been their normal way of working in timed internal school tests, timed topic tests, mock examinations. So your SenCO would have had that student on their radar, that student has genuine time management difficulties. So the answer to that is, and obviously it wouldn't be for you as an exams officer, that really is for your SenCO. Possibly, if it gets more challenging with support from the senior leadership team, is no, parents do not determine arrangements for their child's exams. It's for the SenCO, and I would have thought that a student who needs a timer would have been well on the SenCO's radar by now.
Brilliant, thank you, Nick. Second one, do we need to return exam support booklets when returning completed papers?
Not quite sure, Rebecca.
What they mean by
yes,
booklets.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to ask them if the person can come back to you on that one, Rebecca, because Lynn and I are not sure what's meant by exam support booklets. No.
Okay, I'll double check in a moment.
Okay, don't worry.
Same person has asked another two questions. Can we set out exam papers prior to candidates entering the room if an invigilator is stationed in there, is second pair of eyes and does not leave?
Right, okay, so I think I know. So I think I know so I think I'll try and answer the first one. So yes, you can actually open the question paper packets in the room to place on the candidate's desk, but obviously before those question paper packets are open, the second pair of eyes check has taken place. So in a big examination like English language, like maths, for your large core entry GCSE subjects, and you could place the candidate's question papers on the candidate's desks before they enter the room, but at least one invigilator, and I would probably say more than one invigilator in a large, exam hall where you might have 270 students doing GCSE maths. You're really going to have, I would say, the bulk of your invigilation team in there
once the candidates are entering. So I think that how I understood it, they want to put the papers on, leave an invigilator in the room. Before it starts, but the minute they're going to let candidates into the room, they need to have the full cohort of invigilators.
I would probably say that if you've got a very large exam hall, I would say I think I would personally say that you just make sure your invigilation, the bulk of your invigilation team are in the room. Because you could have an invigilator at the back of that room and then suddenly a question paper disappears off the desk. I've got my back. I don't know who's coming. Oh my goodness, the question paper's disappeared. So I think, yes, you can, but in a large exam, you've really got the bulk of your invigilation
Having
team.
one invigilator between us is not enough. I would say almost in all cases, having one invigilator is not ideal.
Yeah.
I would always say to have a second one for their own protection. Should something, we wouldn't want anything to go wrong, but should suddenly something appear like a photograph of the exam paper on social media,
Yeah.
you would that invigilator would easily be able to say, but there was someone else here present with me all the time. So I would say in all cases, I wouldn't need one invigilator with papers on the table.
No, because I mean, if you think about it, if you had 20 question papers, I'm
Yeah.
going down the road, well, I might be on desk 18, and then
Yeah.
lo and behold, somebody's come in and
And it's different if you're in an access room and you've only got one candidate. But
Yes.
I think the minute you've got a number of
Yeah.
papers out, I'd be very nervous. I wasn't sure if the other part of that question was about, could the invigilator be the second pair of eyes check in the exam room? And yes, they could be the second pair of
Yes.
eyes check in the
Yeah.
exam room. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you both. Next question, please can you give clarity on how to manage printing papers for laptop users if the printer is in a different room, such as some pupils leave early, so what happens to the papers once printed?
right, okay, I think
After the exam.
yeah, so basically what would have to happen obviously is, so if you had a student who had completed an exam using a word processor and you were allowing that candidate to leave the examination 1 hour after the awarding body's published starting time, and the script was printed, the candidate verified that all pages of the typed script were present, then the invigilator would have to hold that typed script on the invigilator's table, because what you can't have is scripts going off to the exam office at different intervals.
Yeah.
So you'd have to, so you know, once all students had actually completed that examination, then obviously all the check, but all those scripts would be made against the attendance register. It couldn't be that one student, because they left the exam room early, that script could then be collected and taken to the exam. They've got to be taken as a bundle.
Yeah, I think what they're asking is if they've got to print it in another room and that candidate's left, how do they get the candidate to verify the pages?
So the candidate couldn't, I would say the candidate cannot leave the examination room until that typed script has been printed off, handed to them, and they have verified that is their typed script, that all pages are present, that is their work.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. Next question. I work at a school with 2 centres, boys and girls. GCE girls will sit their exams at boys' centre. I have submitted an alternative site form. One of the pupils has a clash in the afternoon. The plan is for the pupil to sit one exam in the morning and one in the afternoon. She will be supervised. It would mean removing the paper from the registered site and moving it to the alternative site more than 90 minutes before the exam published start time. Is this acceptable due to the circumstances?
Yeah, it's a timetable clash. Is it a timetable clash?
Yes.
Yes, it's a timetable clash, and they're opting to take one of the papers earlier.
Yeah.
So they can split the paper in their secure storage room, seal up the papers that they're not using, put that paper in a non-transparent envelope, seal it to take it for, providing it is not a mathematics exam for the early exam. So they've got a plan, and they're moving one paper earlier, is what I understand that question to be. And is it over 3 hours? Is it more than? It sounds to me that we haven't got the full information to make a totally informed decision.
Yeah, it doesn't say, but what I can do is take the name of the person and perhaps follow up.
Yeah, well done, Rebecca.
Email.
The information is too scarce to make a full decision.
Because I mean, part of me is thinking possibly that exam should be taken in the centre of entry, but I agree with you. I think we just need a bit more information on that one, Rebecca, before we gave a definitive response.
It would make sense not to if it's only one candidate, really.
Okay, we can follow that up. That's fine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do attendance registers have to be locked in the secure storage as well?
No. So your attendance registers must be kept in the secure room, but they don't have to be kept in the secure storage facility. And I suspect if you're a big centre, you probably wouldn't be able to actually have them in the secure storage unit facility because, as I said, obviously your secure storage facility has to have the capacity to store up to 3 weeks worth of question papers. So if you had the space, fine, but they don't have to be. The principle is that they are in the secure room. You walk into your secure room as the exams officer, as a senior leader. Might be that you've got a lead invigilator that's assisting you. They can see, oh yeah, they're the attendance registers, and whether you've got them by awarding body in date order, but they are in the secure room.
Yeah.
Thank you. When we take packed scripts to reception to be collected by parcel force, as it can sometimes be well into the collection window, before they are collected, can they be kept in a locked cupboard drawer within reception, which is continuously manned?
The collection window should be a 2-hour window. And if they are taken down and they kept at reception for that 2-hour window period, that is fine. But anything beyond that, they should have been returned to the secure storage room.
So I would agree, Lynn. So I would say that the key principle obviously is that those packed scripts are being kept in a locked cupboard, etc. Ideally at reception, that the reception staff know to hand them over to.
Yes,
parcel
if you
force.
put them in the cupboard, they're in a locked cupboard, that they're not left there
No.
overnight at reception.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the other thing, to that your reception staff are briefed, obviously, that they only hand them over, obviously, to the designated parcel force driver, and if they haven't been collected by the window,
Yeah.
they are then brought back down and put into the secure room for storage overnight.
Yeah.
They can't be left. They mustn't be left in a cupboard, in a drawer, at reception. If parcel force don't turn up within that window, they must be brought back down to or taken to the secure room where they are stored overnight securely within the secure room.
Yeah.
Fab, thank you. Do we need to keep a list of 6 key holders for the inspector to see?
You should be aware of who the 6 key holders are and their role. We don't need to physically see a list, but it probably is easier for you just to have it detailed down who the key holders are and their role.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's good practice that
you
know that though they are the key holders who have been approved by your head teacher, your principal.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can the key safe be placed outside the secure room, or does it need to be in a different area?
It can be outside. It's fine.
Fabulous, thank you. Regarding supervised rest breaks, can a student take a break at their desk and they can take a brain break rather than necessarily going outside the exam as a movement break?
Yeah, so basically the supervised rest break may be taken at the candidate's desk, but obviously what you would need to do obviously is to either supervise that candidate at their desk, but even more so obviously is that you'd need to actually I would say remove the question paper answer booklet, because it is basically a supervised rest break. And the candidate shouldn't be actually using that supervised rest break as an opportunity to sort of formulate their sort of questions. So they're going to do it at their desks, and actually the invigilator obviously would take the question paper off their desk. They would hold it for the interval of that supervised rest break and then basically hand it back to them. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you need to factor that into your invigilator planning for that particular exam, because full well that's you're going to have a supervised rest break or supervised rest breaks during their exam. If you know when they're going to happen, then obviously the invigilator would then obviously implement the supervised rest break. It could be that the candidate puts their hand up to flag that they are ready for their supervised rest break. You're just taking the question paper of them for that interval. It's being logged by the invigilator. That's when the exam stopped. That's when it restarted. So they are being given the full duration for the examination.
Thank you, Nick. As a small alternative provision, all our candidates have access arrangements. Our largest room is 6 students. Can we have 1 invigilator per room with 1 roving invigilator, or are we best to have 2 invigilators in the rooms holding 4 and 6 students?
Depends what they've got.
Yeah, I think that one needs to be followed up as well.
It does, yeah, because it depends what arrangement they've got.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to formulate that through, Rebecca, and I mean, it very much depends. Are you talking about, students, supervised rest breaks, so the students got to come out of the room, etc.
So I think it needs more information.
Okay, great, thank you. Do the 6 key holders have to be exams officer and SLT? Do reception admin staff count if they are used for exam admin invigilator on occasions as well?
The key holders should be involved in the examination process. So if they are involved in the examination process and the head of centre has said that they are all right to be a key holder for the secure storage room, then I would say it would be all right. If they are doing some, you said, of the examination process and invigilation, but the head of centre should have cleared them. They shouldn't have a conflict of interest, and they only a key holder for the room.
Brilliant, thank you, Lynn. Do the 6 key holders, no, that's the same question. Can a member of the learner support team scribe, be a reader for a pupil if there is another invigilator in the room?
Yes, they can, but the key principle is that learning support assistant has been thoroughly trained. So they do understand that it is very different reading and or scribing for a candidate in an examination. So they've been thoroughly trained and they understand what they must not, may do.
Thank you, Nick. If a scribe is using a word processor that the candidate does not have access to, does the scribe's word processor need to have the same offline conditions, e.g. spell check, as a candidate using a word processor themselves?
Well, I mean, so if the student is not dictating punctuation, is not dictating their spellings, then one could argue that it is somewhat irrelevant whether the spelling and grammar check is switched on, because the candidate isn't dictating their spelling, punctuation, and grammar. But I don't think it would be appropriate. I really don't, for a scribe to be using a laptop with the internet.
No,
definitely not. Or that they haven't got access, to drives, files, folders. So that's definitely got to be switched on. It would not be appropriate for a scribe to be having a laptop where they could suddenly, check the internet. Yes, I'll go on the BBC News website or something, or I'll just, whilst the candidate, say for example, because there will be, obviously the candidate will at some point be formulating their answers. You can't have somebody acting as a scribe who's then checking their work emails, or I'll have a look at the internet, or I've got to look at that school document. So no. So the only thing that could be switched on is a spelling and grammar check, but no internet, no email, no access to drives, files, folders.
Thank you. Next question, re-noise. We are in the countryside and can have birds making a lot of noise outside. What can we reasonably do about this?
Well, you wouldn't be able, I think it's fair to say, you wouldn't be able to apply for special consideration because of birds singing, birds tweeting. I don't think, there's anything that you can reasonably do. I think that's just, you're not going to get, an exam room where it is absolutely completely, you know, quiet. You know, you could, I'm sure, is anybody in West London, they could, you know, there are going to be planes going over the exam hall, or indeed,
Ambulance going
yeah,
by.
you know, Gatwick Stansted, I could go on. So there's nothing you can do. I think as Linda said across the table to me, it's nature, but you couldn't apply for special consideration because that would be deemed trivial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Regarding desks, this seems more of a statement, perhaps clarification. So the ICE states 11.11, wherever possible for timetabled examinations, A, all candidates should face in the same direction. And then it says it doesn't state that must.
Yeah, the difficulty if they're not facing the same direction, so they should face the same direction. If they're not, and you've got them against the walls, you have to be very sure that they can't be overlooked and that they can all see the notice board and they can all see the clock. Because if you've got them facing the walls, for example, on 3 different walls in the exam hall, can they all see the notice board? Can they all see the clock? And can they be overlooked or not?
And also the other thing is, of course, when the invigilator is positioned,
Yeah,
invigilators
are where they positioned will be key.
will be able to see. Yeah.
Key in that instance.
Thank
Be
you.
very mindful, I think, Rebecca, of that one. Whoever asks that question, be very mindful of the layout of the room.
The layout of the room.
Yeah.
Visibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. If there's just one candidate in a room, can they hand sketch the plan?
Yes,
Yeah.
the seating plan. Yeah, there's no reason not to. Yeah,
As long as
it's got the detailed
Yeah,
information, that's fine.
a seating plan that could be shown to us, to an inspector,
Yeah.
could be sent to an awarding body. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fabulous. My head teacher has expressed that she prefers a live reading of the exam announcement at the beginning of the exam as opposed to playing the video recording. Is there a JCQ preference?
There is no preference.
No. Long as
If the centre can determine which format they want to use, so long as they do it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Lynn. The key principle is that that Invigilator announcement is either read to the students or it's basically played to them, but it must take place before any examination. Yeah.
Okay, I'm conscious we've got a few minutes left. We do have lots more questions, so just to clarify, if we haven't answered the questions, we will follow up on an email to the relevant exams officer.
Yeah, so I think we finish at 11:30. Yeah, if we do 2 minutes, Rebecca. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. So a couple more questions. If there are multiple entrance doors to enter the exam room, do you need the posters on each door? So the warning and unauthorized items.
Yes,
Fab.
if you are using those doors, yes.
Yes. So those,
Brilliant.
if they are multiple entrances which candidates are coming into the examination via, then you must have the notices on those entrance doors.
Thank you. Could I have a separate paper highlighting candidates' access arrangements? The information will be too small to read if a candidate has lots of access arrangements, and the acronyms, especially supervised rest breaks and scribe, are easily being mixed up by invigilators.
So I'm assuming they're talking about on the seating plan. So they need a separate.
Yeah, they haven't confirmed. Yeah,
but I would say if that's what they mean, if on this they can't note all the arrangements on the seating plan, then it would be fine to have a more detailed one, so long as on the seating plan you have some way of code referencing it. I know I've seen in centres where they'll have yellow, and then on additional sheet the yellow details all the arrangements that candidate has. for example.
Yeah, so you couldn't you? You could shade it yellow, and it's actually, and then there's a key that says yellow
No,
is.
it's for this, the
is-
supervisory
yeah,
breaks, or
blue
they might
is-
have a yellow, pink and green
Yeah, yeah.
line on it, and then that references it. So yes,
Yeah.
so long as it's highlighted on the main seating plan for the invigilator to be aware.
Okay. Should we squeeze one more in?
Do one more. Yeah,
Got
got
one.
one, yeah, one more.
Yeah, one more. Do we need to go through AAO if a student has anxiety for a separate room?
No, no. So basically an alternative rooming arrangement, obviously that's for your SenCO to determine, but please no, don't need to process an online application for that, and your SenCO doesn't need evidence. That's centre delegated, it's their professional judgment based on their knowledge of the candidate's difficulties, disability.
Brilliant.
Okay,
And we'll
last
leave it there.
question. Last question.
Oh, one more.
Do one more.
Last
Okay.
question,
Yeah, yeah.
We can do one more. If a student needs doodle paper, is this centre delegated or needs an application?
No, I would say that that's basically centre
Yeah.
delegated. What you would need to do, obviously, is to make sure, obviously, that at the end of the exam, the student basically crosses through it, so they're indicating it's rough work and it then gets slotted into their
Yeah,
answer
gets
booklet.
packed in there.
Yeah, but it would be centre delegated again. Your SenCO knows that because of the student's disability, they need to doodle during the exam, but it's their decision. Yeah.
Thank
So-
you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, to you, Rebecca, for posing those questions to us. I apologise we didn't get through all the questions. For those of you who did ask a question, I hope that we answered your question comprehensively. I'd also like to say thank you to Lynn for being my co-presenter, and thank you to you all for coming along this morning. I hope you found it informative, hope you found it useful. Hope it's given you the knowledge, the confidence, obviously, to run your exams this summer, and I wish you, all of you, the very best of luck for the summer. I'm sure it will go well for you. And in advance of that, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for all your work, which is much appreciated.
Thank you very much, and thank you for attending.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
How can we check who is listed as the 2 to 6 key holders on the centre return that was done earlier in the year?
You contacted the National Centre Number team, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could contact NCN, but whoever completed that, which would be your head of centre, should have that list. Yeah. But I would contact NCN if you're unsure.
Yeah. So if you're not sure who your nominated key holders are, and there isn't sort of any sort of reference within your centre as to who those, so there should be, a list which has been authorised by your head of centre, then I would contact the National Centre Number team and explain that you're new to role and you just want clarification on who are the 2 to 6 key holders. And then their email address, all lowercase, is ncn@ocr.org.uk, because OCR manage the National Centre Number Register on behalf of the JCQ member awarding bodies. Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Next one.
We just had another one come in on the same subject. So do we need to inform anyone of a key holder change?
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, we'll do that.
No,
Oh, I don't.
you
Okay.
only do that in the annual update. However, when the inspector comes for the general inspection, they may ask to know who the key holder. So if you've had a change, then you could let the inspector know that you've had a change to a key holder.
Okay, next one, Rebecca.
Fab, thank you. And the next one is, can a roving invigilator cover 2 rooms with scribes, or do we need to put an invigilator with the scribes plus a roving invigilator?
So where you've got obviously the candidate, where the candidate is in a room on their own, then basically provided obviously that scribes, because in some, let's take, say, for example, maths, sometimes because of the technical nature of the subject, sometimes a maths subject teacher will act as a scribe. Now, where that was the situation, you couldn't have a roving invigilator. You'd have to have a scribe and an independent, impartial invigilator. If you had, let's say that you had trained up one of your invigilation teams, so you had recruited an invigilator, they were quite happy to be an invigilator and also read for a candidate, or could be that they read for a candidate, they scribe for the candidate. In that scenario, you'd have to make sure, as I said, that they were trained in all the respective roles, but then you'd have to have the roving invigilator. And the roving invigilator could work between more than one room, but they would just need to make sure that they are periodically entering that room to make sure, obviously, that the scribe stroke invigilator is adhering to the published rules. So it isn't actually the case that when they walk into the room, they happen to hear, say hypothetically, Lynn saying to me, "Oh, do you really want me to type that? I don't think that's right. Do you want to change your..." So they're going in, actually they're observing me saying to Lynn, I would like you to write, please note, Sia, published starting time for morning exams is 9:15. Something, I'm just giving that as an example, but literally Lynn is typing what I am dictating. So at that point, they walk in the room, they are satisfied the integrity of the examination is being maintained, the rules are being adhered to. Okay, next one, Rebecca.
Thank you. How often would a roving invigilator need to come in to see the one-to-one basis?
I don't think you can specify.
No.
Don't think you can specify, but they need to be going in frequently.
I would say, what would you say, 20?
I wouldn't
No.
specify a time.
No. Okay. I think it's down to
reasonable. Yes, down to
professional judgment.
Down to professional judgment.
Next one. Go on, Nick.
I was going to say also probably would depend on the length of the examination as well.
Yeah.
To an extent. Yeah. I think it's probably, you just need to, I think
it's your professional judgment
and whatever you choose, you feel that is reasonable to ensure integrity, compliance. Yeah.
I think Lynn actually confirmed this earlier, but just to double check, will they be able to have a copy of the slides that have been presented today?
After all the webinars have been run.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Our last webinar is on the 24th. So after the 24th, that's obviously when we will circulate the slides. Yeah.
Question. We have a candidate who has to have a mobile phone within 6 meters, so not necessarily on the desk. Will they need to be supervised individually?
If they access it.
Yeah, so I'm imagining with that one, so obviously, so the mobile phone obviously is presumably on the invigilator's desk. The candidate has been seated in close proximity to the invigilator's desk. The moment that candidate needs, and I think I mentioned this, the moment that candidate needs their mobile phone, the moment it's handed to them, that's when they must come under individual supervision. They must be individually supervised. So I think in that particular question, Rebecca, what you've asked us is obviously that probably the mobile phone is on the invigilator's desk. The candidate is in close proximity, but the moment they actually put their hand up and request the phone, when the invigilator hands it to them, then they've got to be actually observing, supervising that candidate to make sure they're only using, say, accessing the medical app, and thus, as per the access arrangement, using the mobile phone for medical purposes.
Thank you. When desks have to face the same way, does this apply to rooms where word processors are being used?
It's a really difficult one to answer.
Yeah.
But if they are using word processors, you need to ensure that nobody can see the screens.
Yeah, and that's
because they've got to have the plugs, and they often have to have them along the walls.
Yeah, so I think to answer, an interesting one, and I think probably I would agree with Lynn. Obviously, they would need to make sure, obviously, that either they might be using privacy screens, might be using dividers. So the candidate can only see their screen. They can't sort of lean. So I'm not going to do it because Lynn's sitting right next to me. But I wouldn't like lean in, and I could see what Lynn is typing, or she could like lean in and see what I was writing. So they'd obviously have to make sure, obviously, that another candidate couldn't see another candidate's screen. And I think also, I'm sure you would agree with me, Lynn, I think in terms, obviously, the way in which they're using the invigilator or invigilators in that room, that they can also, as they are in that room, they can see that the candidate is purely doing the examination.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Rose. Yeah,
Good.
that's great. ICE says that different examinations can take place in the same room as long as it doesn't create disruption. Would different finishing times for both exams constitute creating a disturbance?
No, not if you've trained your candidates on how to leave the room quietly. That's fine. It's just supervising those candidates, so when the first exam finishes, when they are leaving the hall, that they understand that the other candidates are still in exam conditions and they leave it quietly. I think quite often they usually put them at different parts of the hall, so one lot sitting in the front of the hall, one lot sitting in the back.
So I think I would say, also add to that one, Lynn, I think obviously, you could have, a 90-minute GCSE exam and you've got a 2.5-hour A-level examination. The key thing would be, in that instance, would be a member of the senior leadership team or head of year 11, the head of year, is just basically, reinforcing to those students that you may be in a room where there are students. As I say, I met an exams officer last week. She was telling me that some of the BTECs are 3 hours. I know that some of the A-level papers are 3 hours. So they just need to sort of reinforce them, say, look, you may be in the sports hall. There may be students that will still be doing an exam, writing, could be typing. When you leave, you have got to leave quietly, not make a noise, not scrape your chair, not knock a chair over, etc. So it's really drilled into them. They leave the room quiet.
And as they leave the room, immediately outside the room, that they are not being noisy, because the candidates still sitting in the exam can hear.
Yeah.
So it's once they get far away from the exam.
That's a good point, Lynn, because I know, obviously, last year in terms of special consideration applications, it was often sort of noise outside the examination room. So students in that exam room could hear sort of noise in a corridor. So again, as Lynn said, they can't start talking until they're far away
and shrieking.
Next one. Thank you. Will the JCQ inspector inspect evidence for access arrangements for non-exam courses such as WJEC entry pathways coursework?
No, they won't.
No. Because
sorry.
I'm not going to say, if it's entry level, then entry level is centre delegated. Yeah.
So no, they would only inspect for the in a general inspection, because you said a general inspector will only inspect for those GCSE, GCE exams which are run by the awarding bodies, or any technicals, any of the exams listed in the ICE booklet. They will check those.
It's where basically you've got an online application. So you could have a student that's doing GCSEs and say OCR Cambridge Nationals, and so there's there's an online application for 25% extra time. That's what they would be checking for. There is, as I mentioned earlier, there's the approval sheet. Yeah, there's the approval sheet. There's the Form 8 evidence of the assessor's qualification.
Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you. Next one: can a teaching assistant who normally works alongside that candidate be used as a prompt or a reader, as long as another invigilator is present?
Again, I would say it's not a one size fits all, really, is it, Nick?
No.
Not if they've worked with the candidate.
No, I mean, if there was another invigilator present, yes, but they would really have to be thoroughly trained.
Yeah.
Because one of the, and this was, I'm going back many years ago now, probably 20 or so years ago. And I always remember when we did large scale exam officer training events. That's what we used to say. And I get it. I do get it. So the trouble is that because that teaching assistant has worked with the student in the classroom, they prepared them for the examination. Often it's quite hard for them to make that transition from helping them in the classroom to actually those very tight, perhaps some people, stark, shall I say, rules. So my answer would be yes, but there's got to be that invigilator there. They could not act as a reader and invigilator on a one-to-one basis, and they would really have to be thoroughly trained and really understand that this is very different from their role of working with that student in the classroom, preparing them for examinations, perhaps giving them those reading, writing intervention strategies outside of the classroom.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. We use alternative room arrangements for those with reader and scribe to reduce noise. They hold an EHCP. Is this okay?
So, I mean, how the centre accommodates candidates is down to you. Obviously,
you've got the space.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you wouldn't have students with readers and scribes in the main examination hall. What some centres do is that they believe that they've got they can find rooms where the layout of the room, the acoustics of the room are such that they can put their access arrangements candidates in one room, because of the acoustics, it is just a background hum. Others, they will actually on a one-to-one basis. Some centres use partitions. With the partitions, obviously, you need to make sure that the invigilator can see clearly the candidate at all times. It's down to you, I think, is the answer there. You just need to make sure that those rooms, as I mentioned earlier, are appropriate for the conducting of examinations, lighting, heating, noise, particularly sort of that outside noise. Okay.
Thank you. Next one, re-displays on walls. Is it okay if we can't remove the displays that they be covered?
Yes,
that's fine.
Yes, thank you.
Is it okay to use an electronic screen showing the exam details on rather than flip chart or whiteboard?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just to make sure you do get the correct start time, but yes.
Who counts as an authorised member of staff in the area to print secure files?
It will be someone that the head of centre has said is authorised. It will usually be someone involved in the exam process, such as the exams officer, or perhaps they've got a lead invigilator who does that, the exams officer assistant, and sometimes it could be someone from the graphics team at the centre. But the head of centre should have authorised if it's outside of the exams.
So I think in relation to that question, Rebecca, so if the school had, like, say, a reprographics assistant, then I think when I mentioned this at the TEO conferences, I think some people sort of looked at me. I mean, I hope an exams officer wouldn't have to do that. But basically, you would have a lead invigilator, a senior invigilator, an experienced invigilator who would take that question paper in a sealed, secure, non-transparent envelope, would take it to the reprographics office. The only person in that room would be the member of the exams team and the reprographics assistant. So there's no subject teacher, there's no subject expert there. There's no conflict of interest with that reprographics officer assistant, whatever their job title is, and they have been authorised by the head of centre. The head of centre is satisfied. The head of centre is satisfied that there is no conflict of interest. They can therefore handle photocopying that question paper onto blue-coloured paper, yellow-coloured paper, etc.
Okay, thank you. we have a governor who would like to invigilate. Would this be classed as a conflict of interest? Could they invigilate in a room with other invigilators?
Yeah.
Fine.
Yes, so long as they haven't got a relative or close friend or sitting the exam.
As long as they're thoroughly trained as well, not a problem.
Thank you. If a centre has entered a student for an MFL language that the student is studying out of school and is using a host school for the speaking part of the exam, does a transferred candidate application need to be made?
They would need to discuss that, Rebecca, with the relevant awarding body. So whoever's answered that question, because it's an MFL speaking assessment, you would need to discuss the arrangements of that with the relevant awarding body, because they would want to be assured that the person who is conducting that speaking assessment has been thoroughly trained, is competent to deliver it. Yeah. So whoever's answered that, speak to the awarding body. Yeah.
For late arrivals, would you suggest we read them the invigilator announcement before letting them into the exam room?
I would say yes.
Yes, and I would agree, Lynn, and I would say also that they need to be made aware of the warning to candidates poster, the unauthorised items poster.
Yeah.
So
they should have the same procedure as if they'd arrived on time.
And I think Lynn summed it up perfectly when Lynn said, just take your time. That student is going to arrive flustered. If it was a train was cancelled, traffic delays, bus delays, etc. They're going to arrive flustered. So long as you're keeping them under centre supervision, just take the time to read through the invigilator announcement with them, the unauthorised items poster, the warning to candidates poster. You have got their mobile phone. They're not just going to suddenly go in, oh, damn, they've gone in. I didn't ask them about the mobile phone. So just take the time to make sure they haven't got any unauthorised items on. They check their pockets, etc. They've handed over their mobile phone or any other electronic communication device. So we've got 5 minutes left, Rebecca, for questions.
Thank you. So for but they have a candidate who may need to take their GCSEs at home, how would they go about making an application?
They don't make an application. What you've got to do, obviously, first of all, is that the relevant member of the senior leadership team and or the SenCO believe it is appropriate for that candidate to be sitting their examinations at home, and also that the home is an appropriate environment for the candidate to be sitting their examinations. So they do not see any issues in that candidate sitting their examinations at home. There aren't any sort of, how shall I put this, sort of family issues that they're aware of. That is an appropriate environment. And then it would be completing the online alternative site arrangement form, which is accessed when Lynn was talking about the very late arrival form. The online alternative site arrangement form is accessed using the centre admin portal, and that is just a notification process. So you're just recording that candidate with those examinations will be sitting their exams at home.
Thank you, Nick. I think we could squeeze a couple more in. A student wrote his answer in blue, and Invigilator discovered that and gave the student a spare answer booklet to rewrite his answers in black. And no extra time was given to the student to rewrite. Can the Invigilator give the student a spare answer book in this scenario?
No. There's no, I mean, ideally it's black. But obviously, with the advancement in script scanning technology, blue will be fine. So just submit it. Yeah, please. Yeah, if you have that scenario, please do not ask the candidate to rewrite. No. The blue's fine.
Thank you. In the ICE booklet and TEO training for invigilators, it says that it is the responsibility of the candidate to make sure their calculators meet the awarding body's regulations. But in the JCQ information for candidate, written examinations, section C, it doesn't mention to candidates about their responsibility. And I have had students argue this.
So the question, sorry, Rebecca. Say it again.
So basically, we've got it in our in ICE
Mhm.
that it's candidate's responsibility to ensure that the calculator is awarding body, fits
Compliant.
the specification.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mention it in the candidate information.
So I mean, I think it is
Yeah,
I mean, so yes, obviously the candidate does need obviously to make sure obviously that they are using a calculator which is compliant, but at the same time it's a centre's responsibility to be making sure obviously that so it's a candidate. Yes, a candidate. Yeah, I know that this calculator is permissible, but at the same time the centre's got to be reinforcing that as well.
So I think what they're saying is that the candidate's arguing that they don't have to check it because it's not in the information to candidates. But the centre must make candidates aware. That's their responsibility.
Yes.
So it's a bit of common sense, I'd say.
Yes.
But make sure that they are aware.
And that's I would do that as part of your candidate briefings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. If a teacher has a child sitting GCSE maths at a different centre, are they allowed to invigilate GCSE maths at my centre?
No, because a maths teacher cannot, irrespective of whether they had a child sitting or not, a GCSE maths teacher cannot invigilate a maths exam. They could invigilate an English language exam, a history exam, if you're a school,
but not maths.
But not maths. Yeah.
That's
it, is it?
Pretty much all the questions.
Right.
Lovely.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for those of you that persevered. I can see, I think it's about 76 of you persevered. 79. So thank you very much for coming along this afternoon. I hope you found it useful. I wish you all the very best of luck for running exams in the summer. I'd like to say thank you to Lynn as my co-presenter, and a very big thank you to you, Rebecca, for excellently posing those questions to Lynn and I. So well done. And also a very big thank you to you as well, Rebecca, for obviously to making sure obviously we've got all the people along today and sending out the invites. And as I say, I do hope you found it useful. And Lynn, do you want to say any final words?
Thank you very much for attending. And I know my inspectors are very excited about coming out. So thank you for accommodating them during your very busy period. Have a good series.
Yes, very, very best of luck. And we'll see you all soon. And take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
My name's Katie, lovely to meet you. Thank you for all the information. My question was just about transferring the papers into the non-transparent sealed envelopes. So I know that we always have done this for the access arrangement rooms where there's only kind of up to about 15 students in those smaller rooms. But in our large exam venues, there might be up to 150 students in that room. So do I have to take all 150 papers and put them all into because that would be multiple different envelopes and then take them down to the hall?
No, you shouldn't. Okay. You shouldn't have opened the packets, so they would be in the packets which are sealed.
Okay. Perfect.
So you just take them in those packets. The only ones you need to put in a non-transparent envelope that you seal are where you've had to split them into smaller sizes.
Okay, I understand. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so if I go to the questions, we've probably answered some of them just due to going through the presentation, but we'll just go back over them. So the first one that came in was, I work on reception as well as exams officer. Am I okay to sign both? Am I okay to both sign to say it has been delivered and passed on to the exams officer?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
If an inspector, I'd just like to say, if an inspector queried it, you could just clarify that's why it's the same signature.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Lynn.
Yeah. You would need to, because the inspector may query why it's the same person, but you could just clarify that you sit on reception as well as being the exams officer.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Second question, if secure storage facility is only large enough for one person, can second pair of eye check be done in exam room prior to opening the packages?
Well, if you're splitting the packages, they need to be done in the secure storage room. So if the room is too small and you're splitting the packets, one person should go in there, do the first part of the second pair of eyes check with the door closed, then step out, and the second person goes in, closes the door and checks the packages. If you're not splitting the packages and you're taking the packages straight to the examination room because you have got no smaller packets required, the second pair of eyes check can be done in the examination room. But for any packets that are split, it must be done in the secure storage room.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lynn. In relation to override key, is that a key to get into the safe if you can't get into a safe? How is that to be stored again?
Okay, the override key applies to where you've got an electronic coded key safe. There's always an override key because the electronics could fail or the batteries could go flat. That key should be kept on your person, or it should be put into one of those, what I call Airbnb key locks, the coded key locks that are not electronic. It has to be kept as secure as the secure storage room and the secure storage unit key.
Thank you. Can we clarify mobile phone use for medical purposes? We need separate invigilator for them, question mark.
Yeah, so basically, so if you've got a candidate who needs access to a mobile phone because they've got diabetes, which is, as I said before, is normally the most common scenario, it could be a heart condition. So the moment that candidate is given the mobile phone, you need to make sure that candidate is going to be individually supervised. So let's say that there were 8 candidates in the room, one of whom needed access to a mobile phone for medical purposes. You're going to have 2 invigilators, because you're going to have one invigilator that is still supervising those 7 candidates, ensuring the integrity, the security of the exam is being maintained. And then the other invigilator is with that candidate whilst they're using the mobile phone. Because what you can't have is one invigilator whose sole attention is on that candidate with their mobile phone, and you haven't got a clue what's going on behind your back with those other candidates. So that's what I mentioned earlier, is why obviously that needs to be factored in to your recruitment of invigilators, your planning of invigilators, but where you've got a candidate or candidates with access to a mobile phone for medical purposes, they will need to be individually supervised. So if you had, to take it one step further, 8 candidates in the room, 2 candidates will need access to a mobile phone. That's going to be 3 invigilators, because both those candidates may require access. I know it may not happen, but it could. They may need access to their mobile phone both at the same time. And therefore, again, you're going to have one invigilator supervising candidate A with their mobile phone, another invigilator supervising candidate B with their mobile phone, and the other invigilator supervising the remaining 6 candidates, again, ensuring the integrity of the exams being maintained. Is that okay, Rebecca?
That's brilliant. Thank you, Nick. On to roving invigilator. How often should a roving invigilator enter a room, and how long would you say they need to stay? We have 5 one-to-one rooms. Would a couple of times every 5 minutes be appropriate for a 1-hour exam?
No, I wouldn't. Not every 5 minutes. No.
And nor a couple of times every 5 minutes.
No.
I think it is going to be a little bit based on, you need to be there frequently enough should you see an interaction, but not so frequently as to be disturbing the candidates. I don't think you can give a specific time.
No, I really don't know.
I would say what you're suggesting is too often.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you just need to be wary of, and I'm sure Lynn would agree with me, that you could have a candidate who is being invigilated on a one-to-one basis because of a condition such as, say, autism, and having that door open every 5 minutes, and the invigilator coming in, that could well start alarming that student, distressing them, then they're not going to be completing their exam. But perhaps it's taken a lot of effort to get them to actually sit that GCSE exam, for example. So I think it's very hard to put a time on it. I mean, you could say hypothetically, if it was an hour exam, that you'd go in, 20 every 15, 20 minutes.
It might be worth, if you do belong to any exams officer network, asking other exams officers what their practice is. But I would agree with Nick. Every 15 minutes seems more reasonable.
Yeah, definitely. And then perhaps
less disruptive to the
stay there for about 5 minutes, probably.
Yeah.
So use that as, I'm not saying there's no right or wrong answer. It's like how long's a piece of string, but I would say going in every 15, 20 minutes, and the invigilator just standing quite discreetly in the corner of the room, being able to observe that interaction, say for 5 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Two similar questions that have come in. If you, in regards to roving invigilators, so if you can see clearly into the rooms through a window, do you actually need to enter, or can you just watch and get a thumbs up?
I don't think you'd be looking necessarily for a thumbs up, but if you can see and you can really ascertain what is going on, then yes, you can look through the window, because as Nick was saying, there are some candidates that cannot have the roving invigilator go in. It would be better where you can to enter the room, but there may be an occasion where you don't need to enter the room.
So I would say that the norm, shall I say, is for the invigilator to go into the room. But if it is a case that your SenCO, or it might be a head of year, it might be a senior leader, has said, actually, even where you were saying to the students, so let's say, Charlie, this is Lynn. Lynn's going to come into the room to when you're doing your exams, Charlie. Okay, and that's fine to introduce that. Then Charlie knows that Lynn's going to come in. But even that, for some students, that it's taken a hell of a lot of work to get them to sit their exams. So I think in exceptional circumstances, and it will very much be sort of dependent on what your SenCO says, or head of year, etc. It may be actually that is the most appropriate means that the invigilator can actually see into the room, because otherwise you're going to distract that candidate. They may actually then they will freak out. They just cannot cope with it. They will go into meltdown mode. That's the last thing any of us would want. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you both. In relation to desks, all desks must face the same way. Can desks face away from each other around the edge of the room?
Wow.
My first thing is, I would say they should. Is there a reason they cannot face the same way? The difficulty with the desks facing all around the side of the room is, can they see the board with the information on? Can the invigilators easily invigilate them? Can the candidates see other candidates' work? Is there the gap between them, sufficient gap? Are there boards between them? Clock. Can they see the clock? Is there a clock on every wall? I think the preference is definitely to have them all facing the same way.
I think you summed it up perfectly, Lynn, because that's the key thing that we said earlier. Obviously, they do actually need to see, the whiteboard, the blackboard, flip chart, so they can actually see that, yes, this is the exam that I'm sitting. This is the start time. That is the finish time. Oh, yes, I can see the clock. Crucially, the invigilator, where they are positioned in that room, they can actually see that candidate. I really cannot add what Lynn has said, because Lynn is spot on.
If the invigilator is looking at the candidates who are facing the desk, the wall in one direction, can't see the candidates behind them.
Yes.
So you might need to have more invigilators then as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. When you say highlight candidates with access arrangements on the seating plan, does that mean literally highlight, or can they just be flagged with access arrangement codes so they can be identified as having access arrangements?
Yeah, so what you...
No, I was going to say yes.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. And what you could have is on the seating plan, the candidate's highlighted as yellow and another one's highlighted as green. So on the seating plan, the code is yellow equals 25% extra time, green equals supervised rest breaks, blue is a prompter.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to use highlighter, you could write on there.
Yeah, you could literally write
25% extra time.
SRB.
Prompter.
Yeah, or P prompter, etc. You could use codes.
Most centres find it easier to have the highlighter to code it. So then the candidates can't see that it says 25% extra time.
Thank you both.
Okay.
Do all candidates using a word processor need an access arrangement application?
No. So please do not. So do not do that. So where the candidate is using a word processor with the spelling and grammar check switched off, that is a centre delegated access arrangement. There is no evidence of need required. An online application is not required.
Thanks. Going to be similar for this one, I think, Nick. If a candidate needs exams printing on coloured paper, do I need to apply for access arrangements?
No. So please don't do that, because please do not go and select other, because you'll drive the awarding bodies mad, because other leads to referral. So again, an examination question paper on coloured paper, that's a centre delegated arrangement. So you don't need any evidence of need for that. Do not need to process an online application. The same would apply if the student was using a coloured overlay.
Thank you. With regards to mobile phones, we have boxes for each column for students to put their phones in. These boxes are placed in the hall with the students for them to put them in. Once all students are at their desk, we then remove the phones from the hall into a cupboard. Is this allowed?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, sounds very good if you're moving them out the room. Good.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. If a student arrives at 9:55 a.m. for a morning exam and is supervised but doesn't enter the room and start the exam until 10:05, is this a very late arrival or just late?
No, because they've arrived on the centre's premises at 9:55, they're under centre supervision. So that would still, it's when they physically arrive in the centre and come under centre supervision. So if they were on the centre premises at 9:55 or under centre supervision at 9:55, that's a straightforward late arrival.
Thank you. We've got one last question and then we have a hand up. So if we've got time for that. In a reader room with a 1:4 ratio, if we had 8 candidates, would we need 3 invigilators, 2 readers plus another, or would 2 reader invigilators be all right?
So basically, sorry, Rebecca, was it 8 candidates, did you say? Yeah.
If we had 8 candidates, would we need 3 invigilators?
Yeah, so the answer to that is that you would have 2 invigilators, you'd have 2 readers, each reader working with 4 candidates, and then an invigilator. Because the invigilator is the person with the overall responsibility for maintaining the integrity and the security of the exam. So let's say Lynn would be in charge, and then you'd have as the invigilator, because she needs to be observing the interaction between the reader and the candidate. The reader is adhering to the published regulations, so it would be 2 readers and 1 invigilator.
Brilliant. And we're happy to take one more question from the...
Yes.
Fabulous.
Your name is, I can see your...
Danielle.
Danielle, did you say?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I've
Hello.
unmuted you, Danielle, so you should be able to speak now.
She needs to unmute herself, Rebecca.
Can you hear
It
us,
looks like
Danielle?
it's still
Danielle, you need to unmute yourself.
She can't. Rebecca needs to.
Becca, are you able to unmute Danielle?
Can you hear us, Danielle? No, I've allowed the mic, but she needs to unmute herself then.
Do you know what her question is, Rebecca? At all? I suppose you don't, do you?
No.
Okay.
We do have one more question, though. Our readers do not read out in great detail to the students which bits they want reading. Do we still have to follow a 1-to-4 ratio?
Sorry, Rebecca, I think you cut out a bit there. Can you repeat it? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Our readers do not read out in great detail to the students. Students request which bits they want reading. Do we still have to follow the 1-to-4 ratio?
Yes. I mean, I would say that whoever's asked that question, Rebecca, moving forward, where you've got candidates who only require occasional reading assistance, it might be that your SenCO will be better considering an examination reading pen. But for this year, obviously, if you've got students in that scenario, it's the same principle. It's one reader per 3 to 4 candidates.
Brilliant, thank you. And that is all the questions.
Right. Okay. Well, firstly, Rebecca, thank you very much indeed to you. Obviously for coordinating this and obviously sending out the invites to everybody, and as always, excellently posing your questions to Lynn and I. So thank you to you, Rebecca. Thank you to you, Lynn, as well, being my co-presenter. And thank you to all of you. I can't see how many of you there are, but thank you so much for coming along this morning. I do hope you found it informative and it's given you the confidence for the summer. I do apologise if there were any technical issues and you couldn't see the slides. As I do apologise most sincerely for that. I wish you every success for the summer. I really hope it goes well. The very best of luck, and obviously you will receive a copy of the slides. And Lynn, do you want to say anything?
No, just like to thank you in advance for accommodating the inspector when they come to the inspection, and we look forward to seeing you. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.